Hello everybody and welcome. In today's video I'd like to show you everything that I made this winter season, and in the end the winter season was very short for me. I am actually filming this before the end of winter because I have a lot of really big spring projects coming up, events that I'd like to sew for, and then traveling and work engagements that are coming up that are going to take a lot of my time. So I won't have a whole lot of time to work on them. And it's only the end of February now, and so because the holiday season took up so much of my extra free time, I do feel like the winter sewing season was only about 7 weeks long, which is always the case. I always feel like winter's very, very short between the holidays and spring, or when spring starts to show. And so I didn't get to all of the projects that I had planned. And what was funny is that I ended up sewing a lot more of the knit projects that I had planned. Not knit as in I knitted it myself, but out of knit fabrics. I think because this winter season I was craving very cozy, quick sews, but also that would hug me. I was in need of a hug this winter season. And I effectively made about 15 different kinds. So let me show you those. But really quick, if you're new here, hello, my name is Sarah and welcome. I am originally from the East Coast of the United States, but I have been living and working in France, in Paris, France, for about 15 years now. And I mention that because it does influence the way that I dress and the things that I make. This channel is mostly about sewing, a little bit of knitting, and a tiny bit of embroidery that I dabble in from time to time, but a little bit of my life here in France, because that does influence what I wear and what I make. So without further ado, let me show you all of the projects that I made this winter season. The first 3 projects that I finished, that if we go chronologically, were for the Christmas celebrations I was going to at the end of the year in my husband's family in the north of France, and I made an entire sewing vlog about that, about these 3 projects together, if you'd like to see all 3 of them in more detail. I won't go into too much detail here because I've already talked about them a lot in that video. But to talk about them a little bit, I first made the Simplicity 8699 skirt in a houndstooth wool that I found from Sacré Coupon, which is a fabric shop based in the north of Paris. I chose to make this skirt for the Christmas dinner we were going to because I wanted something that was not necessarily very holiday themed, but that I could wear as a staple in my wardrobe or something very warm, because it is made mostly of wool throughout the winter season, and that is exactly what it turned out to be. I didn't finish it in time for the dinner with my husband's family, but also I've been wearing it almost nonstop every week, as long as the weather's cool enough, because it is very warm. And I love it. So I made a size 8 graded to a size 12 at the hips. My hip measurements fell more into the size 14, but I saw with the size 12 that I'd already have about 4 inches of ease at the hips anyway, and I know that the big 4 patterns such as Simplicity size large, or that's what I've heard, and so I figured that 4 inches of ease was enough, that's 2 inches on each side, and that it would be fine if I graded just at the size 12, and it did turn out just fine. It fits really, really well. I'm really happy with the way it fits. It's a very smooth fit, so I think it's partly the pattern, it's partly how I graded it. I'm very proud of my grading skills now. I've sort of had a lot of practice because my waist is always smaller than my hips in pattern sizes if I make something that covers both. I ended up taking about 7 inches off of the hem length as well. I didn't want it to be so long, but I wanted it to be below the knees about 3 to 5 inches, I'd say, and that way it's a little bit less bulky, and I just love wearing this. It's very warm. I ended up being able to match up the houndstooth pattern along the side seams. It is a little bit bulky at the front waistband. We have about 4 layers of fabric with the inner and outer waistband, and then the 2 front pieces that cross over each other. And in this medium to heavyweight wool, it does create a little bit of bulk. But because I usually wear this skirt with a sweater on top or something not super form-fitting on top, then it does sort of camouflage how thick that waistband is in the front, and I don't think it's a very big deal. It doesn't look too weird from the side. But yeah, I'm really, really happy with the way this turned out. If you'd like to see me make this in detail, on that video, I'll link it below as well. The second project I made for the holidays was actually a gift that I wanted to offer to my mother-in-law, and I made the Sew Over It grocery bag out of a basket weave ochre colored cotton from Rascol, which is an online haberdashery based in France. I wanted to make an accessory versus a piece of clothing for her because sizing is always really difficult, especially when you're making a surprise gift. I wanted to keep it a surprise. And clothing as well is very, very personal, and it takes such a long time to make a garment for someone that I would want it to be a collaborative thing versus something that I offer as a surprise or that I make in a month. And so an accessory like this, she may not need this grocery bag. She does do a lot of her grocery shopping on foot or by bike, and so I figured a bag with lots of pockets would be useful, especially this one has two different strap lengths, one that can be held over the shoulder, or there are shorter handles that you can hold with your hand, and then yeah, it's got lots and lots of pockets, and so in a rectangular base, and I figured that it would stand up on its own, it would be easy to pack away or use. And so I'm not sure if she uses it, I'm not sure if it's useful to her, but I figured as an organizational tool as well, like even in the back of a closet, it could be useful. So I figured it wouldn't be too imposing, and I haven't gotten feedback from her yet to know if it's actually useful, but it was interesting to make. It was a little bit difficult to make actually, because especially around the corners, getting it under my machine and getting my needle, even though it was the right size needle, and I went very, very slowly, getting it through all of the layers of the very tightly woven cotton that were on top of each other. It reminded me of sewing jean fabric in that there were so many layers together that sometimes my machine would just not be able to get through it and start shaking and making that awful like chunk 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 sound, which was scary. So it wasn't the best sewing experience, but it did go pretty quickly, and I was very happy to offer something handmade to my mother-in-law, and I hope she likes it. The last make that I made for the holiday season was for the period between Christmas and the New Year, when I had time off from work. I wanted to be able to relax and take my time, and I ended up having to relax because I got very sick with a head cold. But I was happy to have these pajamas to relax in, and I made these sew over it Luna pajama pants, just the pants, not the top, and I made it in a checked cotton flannel fabric because ever since I made my first pair of sew over it Luna pants in a checked cotton flannel, I've been obsessed. I wear it all the time. I love how warm and soft it is, and I've been wanting to make more. I think I found this fabric at Mondial Tissu, which is another fabric shop based in France. And I love this pattern, especially for a pattern fabric, because it doesn't have an outer seam, it only has an inseam along the leg. And so the pant pieces of the pattern are one piece per leg that you fold and then sew up the inseam. And so it's much, much easier to get the check or whatever pattern you're trying to match along that inseam. It is a slightly curved seam, so it's not entirely true or straight, but yeah, I did focus on matching the check along the front of the legs and the back as well, and I'm really proud of how that turned out. And it was actually pretty easy. Once you pay attention to how you're cutting it, then sewing it up is really, really quick and easy. And I wear these all the time. I love the fit. I made a straight size 8 corresponding to my hip measurement because my waist measurement is smaller, but I could always adjust the elastic. I made the elastic custom size. I just sort of put it around my waist and made sure that it was snug, and then sewed it into the waistband. And it fits really, really well. There's not too much fabric gathered around the waist. It's not too loose, it's not too tight. I really love the length. I think it sort of lengthens the legs as well. The waistband doesn't sit at the natural waist, it sits more at the high hips, but it's still really comfortable. And yeah, I love these pajama pants. This checked flannel fabric is a little bit lighter in weight than the original checked flannel fabric that I made this pattern in. And so it's not as warm, and I don't reach for it as often as my white and blue checked version. And so the next time I look for cotton flannel fabric to make pajama pants in, I will look for a heavier weight. But I still love these. I love the colors. I think it goes really well with a lot of the Edie tops that I like to sleep in, and that I made more of that I'll show you in a minute. But yeah, I'm really happy with this, and if you'd like to see me make it, don't hesitate to check out that sewing blog. The next project that I made was a Pattern Scout Bridget tee that I made in a remnant piece of dark green stretch velvet fabric that is 100% polyester, and that I found at Tissu ML a long time ago because I made a dress out of it last holiday season. And I remember, I think I told you I was having a hard time fitting all of the pieces onto this remnant piece of fabric, and in the end I did it. I was able to cut out even the full-length sleeves and the facing out of this remnant piece by fidgeting with it a little bit, and I'm really happy I was able to do that because this stretch velvet was difficult to match to other fabrics in terms of how much it stretches to pick another fabric for the facing, and also the velvet is luxurious against the skin in the facing because I made it so that the velvety side would be facing me. And I originally planned to wear this to the Christmas dinner with my Simplicity skirt, but I ended up not being able to finish it in time, And because it is a sort of jewel-toned stretch velvet fabric, it's a little bit more festive than an everyday sort of thing that I would wear, and so I haven't really worn it yet. There's also the fact that I find that the full-length sleeves look a little bit bulky, so I might change it to a 3/4 length sleeve to sort of lighten up that silhouette a little bit. And then I think the reason I haven't really worn it is that I'm very susceptible to cold drafts around my neck and my chest, like my collarbones, which is why I'm wearing this scarf here today. And I could wear a scarf with it. I think that I probably will if I were to wear it in the future. But I think that's what's kind of prevented me from wearing it. But I'm really happy with the way it fits. It sewed up really quickly and easily, a lot easier than I thought it would. Pattern Scout has an entire video sew along on their YouTube channel, and so you can follow along step by step there, and it was really easy to sew. And I really like the shape of the pattern, so I made it straight size 0. My hip's a little bit bigger than the straight size 0s, but that corresponds to my bust and my waist measurements. But the hem of this top finishes around high hip length, so I didn't have to worry about there not being enough fabric in the hips for it to fit. And it fits really well. I find that the curve between the waist and the high hips is just really nice and fits my body like a glove. And so, yeah, I was happily surprised. And then I find that the square neck is nicely made in that the sleeve piece comes down to the front bodice and it attaches there, and it doesn't create too much gaping at the square neck, because that's a problem with a lot of square neck patterns that I've worked with in the past, is that it's really hard to prevent gaping there. And then I find that it's not too low and not too high, and it's a really pretty shape. So I made it a second time, and let me show you that as well. The second Pattern Scout Bridget tee that I made is in this cotton rib knit fabric that I found from Tissu Email in this dark blue colorway. This one I had 1 meter of fabric, and this fabric was not as wide as the stretch velvet that I made the previous version in, and so I wasn't able to fit all of the pieces. And I wanted to be able to cut the facing out of it more than I wanted the full length sleeve. So I ended up shortening the sleeves to a 3/4 length, and that way I was able to fit all of the pieces on my fabric, and I had a teeny tiny bit, like a teeny tiny pile of scraps left over when I finished cutting this one out. And so then I made the exact same size as the stretch velvet version, and it sits a little bit differently because this fabric isn't as stretchy, but I find that the 3/4 length sleeve makes the silhouette a little bit less bulky, especially if I wear it alone without something over it like a cardigan. And so yeah, I think I'll do that with my stretch velvet version too. But this one I haven't actually reached for or worn at all this winter season, and I think it's because in addition to being a sort of open, bare neckline, it's also made out of a cotton fabric, and cotton doesn't exactly retain heat, especially cotton knits. I find that they're a little bit cold and clammy against the skin, and I just don't reach for it. I think that I'll reach for it a lot more in the spring and early summer when it's sort of rainy and blustery but around 60 degrees rather than cold. But I do think that the dark blue color is classic and will suit a lot of my pants and skirts that I have in my spring wardrobe especially. So I'm excited to wear this soon. I just haven't worn it very much yet. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with this one too. The next project that I made is the Seamwork Leaf Sleep Shirt, and this is a bonus pattern offered to Seamwork members based on the unisex leaf pajama pattern that published I think back in November. And I made it in this white cotton flannel fabric that was gifted to me by Minerva. And Minerva is a fabric shop in the UK, and they gifted this fabric to me in exchange for an article on their website about the piece that I made. And I decided to make this sleep shirt because I was originally planning on making a shirt. But when I received the fabric, I realized that it's a very, very casual fabric. So it sticks to everything. It pulls in fabric dust, hair. It's just really, really hard to keep clean. And I haven't even worn it yet. And so I knew that if I made something that was meant to be worn to work or outside, that it would be difficult to keep looking neat and not sort of sloppy, especially because this fabric sticks to itself really easily and it looks rumpled all the time. And so it's a very, very casual fabric. And so I decided instead to make a pajama piece or sleep shirt that I could sleep in, because after making those Luna pajamas, I discovered that I really, really love sleeping in cotton flannel. It's lovely. And so I decided to try making this. I thought that the pattern was really interesting because it is a unisex pattern and it doesn't feature any darts for shaping, but it is sort of loose and it has a very classic sort of clean silhouette, and I wanted to try making it. In the end, I feel a little bit not sure about this one. Mostly because when I finished sewing it up and I made the size 00 corresponding to my bust measurement, my hips correspond better to a size 2, but there was already 5 inches of ease at the hips with the size 00, and so I didn't feel the need to size up, and I think that it's fine. 5 inches is plenty of ease at the hips. And it's easy to sew, the pattern's very easy to follow, and this fabric doesn't fray, and so I ended up not finishing the seam allowances on the inside. I just pinked them like this and then ironed them flat, and they've been just fine. They haven't frayed at all. And I don't think that they're more sensitive that way either. So I first tried this on, and it made my husband laugh because he said it looked like a lab coat. Or, yeah, like a doctor coat or a lab coat. And I saw it too. It looked kind of sterile. And I wasn't sure how to make it look any better. So I don't think I would recommend making this pattern out of a white fabric. It just looks kind of too structured and sterile and like a lab coat. And so what I tried to do is add little details that would make it a little bit softer. So for example, I added these buttons. These are recycled buttons, and they have a sort of variegated surface. It's sort of a white and off-white pebbled surface, if you can see that, or marbled. And then I also added some embroidery to the pocket. So first I removed one of the pockets because I had sewed on originally both pockets on both sides, and then I decided I wanted more of an asymmetrical look, and so I removed the pocket on the right side and I kept the one on the left. And then I added this embroidery. Now, this is supposed to be a flower. So where did I put it? I recently followed a Japanese traditional embroidery workshop. It's on kogenzashi, which is a type of traditional Japanese embroidery, to create this. This pattern is called ume, and it's supposed to be a plum blossom. And I tried to recreate it. So here on this fabric that we made during the class, it's regular cross-stitching fabric with a very clear weave to it, so easier to follow. And here, the weave is so tight that it was very hard for me to count, and I ended up doubling the pattern. So rather than counting 3 squares between the fibers where the weft and the weave is, I would count 6. And I ended up doing this about 3 different times, like unpicking it and trying to do it again, because I find that it looks kind of strange and it was really hard to get it symmetrical. But I think it adds something to it anyway, even though it's a little bit strange. And from a distance it looks a little bit more like a pink spider than a flower blossom. But I was experimenting. I think it's fine. And in the end, I think that it's going to be really comfortable to sleep in. I won't have to worry about hair sticking to it or little fabric fuzzy balls sticking to it if I'm just sleeping in it, and it's okay if it's not entirely flattering. And it was an easier project to sew up. It is very comfortable to wear. It fits really well, and so I don't think it's a complete waste of fabric and time. And I'm proud of myself for experimenting out of my comfort zone. But yeah, I'm not sure I would recommend making this pattern in white. The next 2 projects I made during a winter sewing vlog that I published recently, so you can watch me make these in much more detail there as well. And the first project that I made was the Helen's Closet Elliot sweater in an off-white double knit fabric made of primarily viscose and polyamide. I already have a white version of this sweater, but the original version that I made is in a fabric that was 100% polyester, not entirely opaque, and the original sleeve length I wasn't really happy with because it ended before the elbows rather than at the elbows or after it, and I prefer at least a 3/4 length sleeve. I find it more flattering on me, and so I wanted to make it out of this fabric. This fabric is much softer, it's thicker, it's squishier, and it's viscose, which means that it will retain a lot less odors if I happen to sweat in it a little bit. And so I worked on that and I finished that, and I'm really happy with that. Already I've been wearing it a lot. It was difficult to keep it clean to be able to film it for you, and I'm really happy with the way it looks. I get a lot of questions about this pattern and how I've styled it, because I've made a few of them in the past few months, and a lot of people ask me if I've sized down, and I have not. My bust and waist measurements fall squarely in the size range because the sizes are sort of ranges rather than one set size, so there's like 0 to 2 and then 3 to 4 or something like that. And my bust and waist measurements fall squarely within the 0 to 2 size, and so I'm not sizing down. I think that it looks different from the pattern photos, perhaps because I make these in much thicker double knit fabrics than perhaps they make their versions in, or that Helen shows in the pattern photos. That's the only reason I could explain it looking different on me. Because, or maybe it's because I style them mostly tucked into high-waisted pants and skirts, and so it looks a little bit different than if it's hanging just loose. But yeah, I don't modify the size, and I highly recommend making them out of a double knit fabric, like a really thick, stretchy double knit fabric, because they're super comfy and I love them. The second project I worked on during that vlog was something that I did entirely on a whim. I had not been planning on making this at all, but I just was struck with inspiration and the desire to work with a happy pink color, especially because Valentine's Day was coming up and I was craving more pink in my life. And so I had this remnant piece of double knit fabric. It's not from the same place as the white fabric that I just showed you. It's from Tissu ML, which is a German fabric shop. And I had bought this fabric about a year ago to make the Helen's Closet Blackwood cardigan out of it, and I just love it. I love the dusky rose color and how squishy and soft and stretchy it is. And I had just enough to make a silver heather dress out of it. And if you've been following me for a little while, you might know that in the wintertime I love wearing sweater dresses. I find them to be the perfect secret pajamas, especially for work. And having just enough fabric to make a cozy, comfy, stretchy dress out of it was perfect. And so I made that. It's definitely a comfort sew for me. It's something I've sewn so often that I can sew it without really thinking and just listening to an audiobook or something at the same time, and it's absolutely done for me. So it was perfect, and I really love the way it turned out. The only thing that I modified in this one was the neckband. So this fabric is very, very stretchy, and I found the neckband to be a little bit too long. I made a previous version out of a black fabric with this exact same fabric, and I find that the neckband gaped a little bit. And so what I did was I measured the size of the neck hole opening, and then I cut the neckband to be 80% of that length. And I think I ended up cutting about 20 to 30 centimeters off of the original neckband length recommended by the pattern. And I wouldn't recommend this for all double knit fabrics. It really depends on how elastic your fabric is, but I knew that mine was really elastic, and so I thought it would be fine, and it turned out really well. It sits really nicely and flat against my collarbones, neck, and back, and I have no problems with it, and it doesn't gape as much as my black version, and so I'm really happy with that. But otherwise, I made the original length. I made a size 6 corresponding to my bust and my waist measurements, and I sized it up or graded up to the size 8 at the hips, and made the original hem length. And yeah, I just finished making that, and so I haven't really worn it a whole lot yet, but I'm excited to wear it, especially into the spring. And it's one of my favorite patterns, and I just absolutely love this color, so I'm really happy that I made that. The next project that I worked on was absolutely not planned, and it's because after making the Helen's Closet Elliot sweater out of that white or off-white double knit fabric, I had just enough left to eke out a sweater, a second sweater in it. And so I made the Soho House 7 taper v-neck sweater. I made the high-waisted version because I didn't have enough fabric to do the regular sweater lengths with the split side seam. I made it with 3/4 length sleeves and the wide neckband because I find it really complimentary. I really love that neckband shape. And this is a grown-on sleeve with a much more relaxed shape, and I wasn't sure if it would suit me very well. And when I first made it, I thought, I don't know, especially because I didn't follow my own recommendation when it comes to this very stretchy double knit fabric, and I didn't shorten the neckband so that it would sit better at the neckline. So you can see this one gapes a little bit. It's a little bit loose, but actually I kind of like it that way. I kind of like that it stands up from my neckline as though it's a collar. I find that that volume is sort of complimentary and nice, actually. It doesn't look like a mistake, and it doesn't look gapey. Like, it's not more loose on one end than another. It's sort of a nicely balanced gape. And I wasn't sure that this pattern would be for me because a lot of grown-on sleeves like that, because I don't have a lot of curves around my top half, there's nothing really to fill out that extra fabric around the armhole in the front, and so it ends up sort of just creating sort of a round, like, center front, like, barrel shape on me, unless I tuck it in. And once I tucked it in, it was lovely. So I will definitely be wearing this mostly tucked in. and I love the way that this looks. I think that this fabric is one of my favorite finds of the season. I think that it is sort of, even though it's advertised as a white fabric, it is more of an off-white, and I think that it looks really nice with my skin and my hair color. And it's a really versatile shape. I really love the neckline. It's not too high, not too low, and it goes with a lot of my high-waisted pants and skirts, and so I think that I'll be wearing this a lot. This was another one that was hard to keep clean to film it for you because I've been wearing it in constant rotation and it's just constantly in the wash. And so yeah, I really love this one and I will definitely be wearing this. I think this is going to be a wardrobe staple that works for a lot of transitional seasons as well. So this is a great make. You might notice that the lighting is getting darker and a little bit more yellow, and it's because today is a very gray and rainy February day, and it was raining pretty hard and hailing earlier, so you might hear rain in the background. I hope it's not too distracting. And yeah, the light has all of a sudden just gotten gray. But we shall keep going. The next two projects is out of this fabric that I'm wearing now, and I originally planned to make a cardigan out of it, so I'll show you that first. I made the Helen's Closet Blackwood cardigan again, but this time, and for the first time for me, I made the longer length, so sort of the mid-thigh length and with the pockets as well, and I made it with the full sleeve length as well. I think that this is probably a project that didn't work out as well as I wanted it to. It's not a failure, I can still wear it, but there are a few things about this pattern and fabric combination that don't work, and so let me tell you about it. So firstly, this fabric is not very stretchy, and the Blackwood cardigan sleeves are very tight. And so you need a certain amount of stretch in the fabric to be able to fit it over another garment. And this fabric has a very small, I think 5% quantity of wool in the fiber. Otherwise it's polyester. But that wool fiber makes it kind of itchy. And I can show you here, maybe. It's kind of hairy. Can you see that? It's got these little gray or black hairs that sort of stick out of it, and they're very wiry and itchy. And so I don't want it against my skin. And it's hard because this fabric isn't very stretchy. It's hard to fit it over something with sleeves to protect my skin from how itchy it is. And so that's one way it doesn't work. And then the second way is my own fault. I should have sized up at the hips because my hips are larger than my waist and bust measurements and pattern sizes. And with the shorter length that I usually make, I don't have to size up because it hits at the high hip and it doesn't need that extra fabric at the hips. But I totally forgot to modify the pattern pieces to grade up at the hips. So this cardigan doesn't close in the front anyway. It's supposed to hang sort of off to the side, but these hang even further back at my hips because there's not enough fabric in the back and the sides. And the side seam kind of slants back towards my back, which isn't a big deal. It doesn't keep it from closing because it doesn't close anyway, but that's a mistake on my part. And it's more the sleeves and the tightness of the sleeves that bother me. So I'll have to see if I can figure out how to wear it because it doesn't fit very well over my sweater dresses, for example. So I'll have to experiment with that and get back to you. But the second project that I made worked much better, and that's what I'm wearing today, and so let me show you that. This was a spontaneous make because I wanted more cozy sweaters that I could wear, especially around the house, to keep me warm but not too warm, kind of moving around and working on my sewing projects, for example. And I decided to make this because I had just enough fabric left over from the Helen's Closet Blackwood cardigan out of this same marled gray, slightly wool fabric. This is also from Tissu Amer. It's the fabric shop in Germany. And I'll link that shop below if you'd like to check it out. They have a large selection of really great double knit fabrics. And I had been eyeing this pattern, so this is the Seamwork Callan sweater, and it is with the bonus sleeves. So the original sweater comes with very wide sleeves, but the Seamwork member bonus pattern pieces feature this straight, more tight sleeve. And I prefer the look of the regular sleeve, like this, versus the wide sleeve, because even though the wide sleeve is interesting and could be a little bit more novel based on what I wear, I find that they're not very practical. Like, they get stuck on all kinds of stuff. You can't tuck it into a cardigan very easily or a coat very easily. It just sort of hangs there, and I find that the shape of the bodice or the front and back part of it is already a little bit loose, and therefore I don't need the extra volume in my arms. And so I decided to make that, and I wasn't really sure about this front placket part either. So the shoulder attaches here in the front, and it has this area here if you want to add buttons. But I decided not to add buttons because it just wasn't really my style. And I wasn't sure about the neckline, but in the end, I absolutely love this sweater, especially for the neckline. I find that the sweater is the perfect amount of ease. It's not too fitted, it's not too loose, it's not too boxy, but it still has this split hem at the side that makes it easy to wear, either tucked or untucked. And I really love the length of the sleeves. They're not too tight either in this fabric, even though it has less elasticity than a lot of double knit fabrics. And it's just great. And especially, and to my absolute delight, it fits perfectly over my Sew Over Edie tops. So if you've been following this channel for a little while, you might know that I have a lot of Sew Over Edie tops because I prefer wearing them around the house when I'm relaxing or to sleep in, because I can make them out of really soft, drapey, viscose fabrics, and it's just absolute luxury to have that fabric against my skin. And this neckline matches the Edie top neckline almost exactly. I'm wearing one underneath it now, if I can show you. And it just keeps this slightly itchy fabric off of my skin, but it provides a layer of warmth over what I usually wear around the house. It has been by my side and on my body almost constantly since I made it. And I'm really, really happy with this. I think that this is an example of a great pairing of fabric and pattern, and I am over the moon. Today I've paired it with a silk scarf. This is a scarf that I bought secondhand in a thrift shop about 10 years ago, and I absolutely love these colors, and I like styling it like this, and I think it looks really nice against this gray sort of marled fabric. And so yeah, I could not be happier with this. I was so uncertain about the shape of this pattern. I did not know if it would be for me. I thought that maybe the front sort of button placket here along the sleeve would be a little bit too harsh, a little bit too military for me, but oh, I love it, and I highly recommend it. So lastly, I made 4 more Sew Over Edie tops. This is a pattern that I absolutely love because it's not too casual, it's not too formal. It works for staying in the house and sort of lounging around in. It works for going out. It even works for going to work, depending on the color, for example. And I just love the shape of this. I love the bateau neckline and the 3/4 length sleeves and how it's not too loose, not too tight. And I made it in 4 different colors this time, or this season. I made one in a dark navy blue. I made another in a dark brown fabric. I made another in a slinky sort of burgundy fabric. And this fabric is not as good quality as I thought it was. It's really delicate and not very well woven, as in it just feels like it's about to fall apart. And so I'm not sure how long that one will last because it's already sort of pulling at the seams. And then I made a 4th in this buttery soft apricot colored fabric, or sort of orange sherbet color. And this one was probably the most daring for me. I don't wear a lot of orange, but when I saw it on the website, I bought this from, I think, Benitex, which is another fabric shop based in the suburbs of Paris. And it made me feel so happy. This sort of apricot sunrise color. And in the end, I think that I can pull it off. I think that it does make me look extremely pale when I wear it. That's not a bad thing, necessarily. If I want to, I feel sort of like one of those ladies in a Rococo painting when I wear this. Like very, very pale, and if I put a little bit more blush on my cheeks, maybe it'll look even better. But I love this fabric. It is super soft, and it's a thicker viscose jersey, and so it's really, really cozy. It's really comfortable and luxurious against the skin. And I think that, I think it works. And I have plans to make 5 more, which I'll show you in my Spring Makes video coming very, very soon, because I just absolutely love this top, and I would like to have it in a rainbow of colors. So I have enough to be in rotation constantly. So in my winter plans video, I mentioned that I was going to follow 2 embroidery courses here in Paris proposed by a Japanese-French association on traditional Japanese embroidery called kogenzashi. And so I've been to 2 sessions so far, and I'm planning on going to the next sessions as well. And in the first one, I made, like I showed you earlier, this ume pattern, so the plum blossom pattern. And then the second session that took place just last weekend is this pattern. I had enough time to make 2 of them, and it is the Neko no Ashiato pattern, which means a cat step. I'm trying to translate because it was translated to us into French as pas de chat, and yeah, so not like a cat paw, but a cat step. I'm not sure how to translate that. But I think this method is really interesting, and especially we're learning how to make the back look just as clean as the front, or almost. And I don't know, I really love embroidery, and I love how, for me, it's kind of meditative. And eventually we're going to learn how to be able to combine the different motifs to make a band, to, I don't know, embroider a belt or even, I don't know, a yoke of a pattern, for example, and sort of put them together as we wish. And I can't wait. So I will continue learning this. It's nice to learn something complementary to sewing practice, even though I applied it somewhat unsuccessfully to my sleeve shirt. Eventually, yeah, I think that it'll help me to be a little bit more creative with what I'm making. Rather than relying on having interesting fabric, I can make the fabric more interesting or the product more interesting by adding more details, because I don't usually think of how I can embellish something. And I'd like to work on my embellishment skills. And so yeah, I'm really proud of these, and I can't wait to learn more. The last project that I'm working on is a knitting project, and I've already shown this to you in my winter plans video, and it is the Crayabea kip sweater that I'm still working on. And as you can see, there is a sleeve, and I'm working on the second sleeve now, but originally I had already finished the 2 sleeves, but then I went back and I looked at the way it was joined at the shoulder, the way I picked up the stitches at the shoulder, and I realized that I did it wrong in the first sleeve versus the second, and I don't know, this is banging, sorry, and I don't know how to, for example, if I were to want to cut the sleeve off at the arm side here and reattach it without unraveling the whole thing and then knitting it all again. I don't know how to do that, and I don't have the knitting vocabulary to know how to look that up. I searched for a while and I couldn't figure out the technique to, cutting and then reattaching a piece of knitting. So if you know that word, if you know that vocabulary, so I can look up the technique, don't hesitate below. But I got frustrated and I just unraveled the whole sleeve, and now I'm knitting it back up. And this sweater will get done. I'm not sure when, but I will finish it. Once I finish the sleeve, all I have to do is the neckline, the ribbing at the neckline, and then I am done, and I can move on to something else, and it better be worth it. It better fit well. Anyway, I have tried it on, and I like the fit in the front. I'm not sure about the sleeves yet. I haven't tried the sleeves on yet, but I think it'll be fine. As long as it fits well in the body, it'll be fine. I just need patience and that vocabulary. Please help. So there you have it. Those are all of the winter projects that I finished this season. Let me know what your projects were this winter season, if you finished them and you're proud of them, or if you're still figuring them out and powering through. I would love to know. I will link all of the patterns and fabric shops I discussed in the description below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't hesitate to leave a like below and to subscribe so you don't miss any new videos from me. I hope that the end of the winter season, if you're in the northern hemisphere like me, is clear and bright and sunny and not blustery and windy like it is for me today, and that you have lots of inspiration and motivation to work on your creative projects. Take care, and I will see you again here soon. Bye-bye.